Hey everybody, it's Jay. Welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing some photo critiques. Started doing these back in, I guess it was late last year, and I got really good feedback. I've asked my viewers to send in photos for a critique, and I got a lot of photos. So I'm going to go through some of them now. If you've sent in a photo, if you don't see it today, I will get to it. I'll be doing these on a regular basis. With these critiques, I'm hoping what you get out of it is sort of a critical way of looking at photography, whether it's someone else's work or more importantly your own work. If you are interested in having your images critiqued, just send in one or two to me. It's jcphotocritique@gmail.com. I'm going to put a link to that in the description below so you know exactly where to send it to. Remember, these are only my opinions, and so you might have a different opinion. If you do, put it in the comments down below. But with that, let's get started. We'll jump on and we'll start looking at the first image. Okay, so here we are on my computer, and the first image is, I guess I call it a travel shot. And this is taken in Hawaii. I have been to Hawaii many times, and this really reminds me of Hawaii, which is the mark of a good travel shot. I love the silhouette of the palm tree. I love the long canoe in the back. I've been on those canoes. They're a ton of fun. So overall, this is a really good shot. The colors are good as well. A couple things, and it's really just paying attention to details. For example, when I've got things encroaching in the frame that really don't add anything, I'm going to get rid of them. So if you look at the upper left, you got these, I guess, fronds from another palm tree coming into the frame here. There's also some sensor spots, by the way, now that I can see. I'd get rid of those too, but those you only see when you zoom in. But these things are super easy to get rid of. Just go to the kind of the healing brush, go over it, and these will disappear pretty quickly. So this is a real easy fix. These on the upper right too, I probably would get rid of as well. And then in addition, there are some on the side here. The other issue is that the horizon line is not straight. Again, really easy fix. Go to the crop tool. You want to go to the straightening tool and just draw a line right across the horizon, and bam. Super easy fix. These little details are important. You're responsible for every pixel in the frame, so make sure it's right. Certainly before you show it to someone else or post on social media or send it to someone like me for a critique. But overall, a really good travel shot, really nicely composed as well. Let's go to the next one. So this, let me make this bigger. Obviously a shot from an airplane, and I like it. It's got this really cool abstract nature. I like the black and white processing. And again, I like the contrast as well. I think you could have a debate here. Do you want the airplane wing in there? I think some people would say yes. My bias would be not to have it in there. You're up so high, you kind of know you're in an airplane. So let's just crop it out for a second just to see. You guys can kind of decide whether or not it's better or worse. So if you look at it, something like this, now you have sort of this abstract shot of the landscape from high above. I think it's kind of interesting. I prefer this, but I could go back and forth. Some people would really like that airplane wing in there. But overall, a good shot. When I'm in a plane, I'm always looking out, and it's pretty rare I see something I want to shoot. This was well seen by the photographer, so good job. So I guess I'd call this a travel shot as well. This is obviously a beautiful location with that turquoise water, these great rocks. The challenge here that the photographer had was there's a big dynamic range. That cloud on top, for example, is much brighter than these rocks, which would be in shadow in the lower right. And it looks like they did some HDR just based on the visual, which I think detracts a little bit from it, but there's not a lot you can do. The other thing, which just is kind of weird to me, it looks like there's a bend or a crook in the horizon line, right kind of in the middle here. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. I could be seeing it wrong. I'm not sure. Lastly, the lower left, this rock jutting out, just doesn't do anything for me. I want to see more rocks or none at all. And in fact, I look at the image and it's a little bit weighted towards the right. It doesn't feel balanced to me. One idea would be to just lose the left side of this image to some extent. crop it this way, that's kind of where the action is. So I think I like that better. And but overall, it's a pretty good shot. The one last thing is this kind of shot is tough to capture in the middle of the day, which is, I think, when this photographer shot this. This is the kind of shot, if you can, shoot it at, kind of golden hour, sunrise, sunset, and you get much better light. This light's really harsh, and it makes it even more challenging to shoot. But overall, a really pretty sight and a nice shot. So architecture. This is the Hydro. It's a stadium. I believe it's in Scotland. And I like this. This is a really cool building. And I like the way the photographer really featured some of the important parts of this architecture. The curvature of it, the line leading on the bottom of the image. I like kind of the light coming from the right as well, which is where it was coming from. For me, the sky's a little too dark. I will darken the sky when I'm doing photography or processing for architectural photography. I tend not to go fully black. I was looking online just for other shots of this building, and I found this one on 500px. So again, a little different take. They had some cloud movement as well. This was I guess a longer exposure. Looks like actually 320 seconds. So different, but softer, without that dark sky. To me, it's a little bit more appealing. But again, overall, this is a good shot. I like it. And again, it makes me want to go shoot this building. So I guess I got to go to Scotland now. I'll add it to the list. So this, you can see what the photographer was looking at, right? They're looking at this really cool repeating pattern that you see at this train station. And it's pretty cool. A couple things throw me off and make it kind of less than perfect. This yellow thing, I don't know, it's not really a seat. I'm not sure what it is, but storage area right in the middle. It's not right in the center, so it's kind of throwing me off a little bit. In addition, there's a lot of busyness going on in the background, certainly on the right side, which is, what you get at a train station. There's not much you can do about it. I'm not sure, maybe getting in front of this yellow thing and shooting without it in there, pointing up a little bit, but it looks a little unbalanced because that thing's not in the center. It looks a little bit like a cell phone shot. One other thing you can do at a train station, which is always fun, is to wait for trains to come by and use a somewhat longer exposure. And so and that would take away some of the distractions too. You would get these kind of moving trains, hopefully on both sides, which could add to it. But overall, pretty cool shot. And I get what the photographer was going for. Okay, let's move on to the next image. So this is a long exposure. I'm not sure where it is, somewhat minimalist, but I like this one. This is really nice. I love the soft color of the sky, shot at the right time of day. And I'm looking at some of the details. This is not just a long exposure. This is a super long exposure. According to this data, it says it's 775 seconds. That's like 13 minutes long. I'm not quite sure what you get out of 13 minutes versus 3 or 4. Obviously, that water gets remarkably smooth and glassy. But again, if you did a 3-minute exposure, generally you achieve that. What you do get is some of that cloud movement. Those clouds are pretty high up, and so a shorter exposure, you might not see the movement of the clouds. With a really long exposure, you do, which is great. The only thing I would say there is, again, this is really picky, but if you look on the far right, let me zoom in a little bit. Let's see. Well, let me zoom in again. If you look on the far right, you can see there's something there on the edge of the frame. I'm not sure what that is. And in the water here as well. Again, that's an easy cleanup. You can either crop it in or just get rid of it. But other than that, I think it's a really cool image. The other thing I would say about this is it looks to me like the sun is setting, out there on the ocean. But so typically when that happens is any object in the foreground is going to seem really dark. But these seem, you see detail in it. So I'm not quite sure how the photographer achieved it, but it's really good. Maybe that long exposure did it. Maybe the foreground was a longer exposure than the sky. I don't know. But again, I like what he was able to create. So here's a beautiful landscape shot. I'm not sure where this is, but I really do like the rolling hills, the layers that are in it. Post-processing, not overdone. There's a softness to it. Compositionally, yeah, your eye does get led into it a little bit. There are some leading lines that work your way back towards the sky, which I like. So overall, this is a really good image. The two things I would say are you're blowing out some of the highlights in the clouds. And you can look at the histogram up in the upper right. You see you've got stuff all the way to the right. You're clipping, again, some of the highlights. It's really hard to get that right because these clouds in the sky are probably much brighter than some of the land and certainly those mountains there, which do have detail. From my computer, if I just take down the highlights a little bit, if you look at those clouds, you'll start to see a little bit more detail in them. So maybe, that's one option. The only other thing, this is really nitpicky, there are some sort of, electrical poles and lines that I would just get rid of because it's so easy to do. It doesn't really detract that much from the image. So this is really cool. I'm not sure about that sky, like where the sun was setting. It looks like it's off to the left or rising. So it's interesting that there's light in the sky, but there's light hitting the clouds as well. Overall, a pretty cool image. So here's a bridge. Again, I'm not sure where this is. Again, really long exposure. This is a 3-minute exposure. You get that nice glassy water. You get the cloud movement certainly in the left side of the image. It's a great looking bridge, so it's a good subject to shoot. And I like kind of layers of mountains and hills you see under the bridge. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I think for this kind of shot, what would make it even better, and this is not always a possibility, but if you were shooting this 12 hours before or after, in other words, the sun or the light here is coming from the right. I would love to see it hitting this bridge right where we're looking from it. That would be pretty cool. Maybe this person was on holiday sometime and this is when they shot this. Very well could have been the case. But if there's always a possibility of coming back or shooting at a different time, noting the direction of the sunrise or sunset, the sun hitting this bridge would have been pretty cool too. But overall, a good shot, and I love the long exposure. So I don't do a lot of bird photography, but I've done some, and I can appreciate good and I notice bad bird photography. This is a good one. A couple things I really like about it. There's two things that jump out to me that are good. One is it is critical when you're shooting birds to get the bird in focus. Sounds obvious, but there's so many shots I see with a bird, specifically the eye of the bird, is not in focus. Here it is. And this is a long lens. This is 450 millimeters. So they were pretty far away. They got it right. The other thing that I like to see, and you do see it here, is a nice separation between the subject, the bird, and the background. You do that two ways, either with light or with focus. In this case, the bird is sharp, the background is nice and soft, so the bird really pops and stands out. And I think that's great. I think you could have a debate whether or not to clean up the background a little bit, some of these branches. Again, they're not in focus, so they're not that distracting, but my instinct would be, and it's not always right, is to clean it up a little bit. Again, not that big a deal. The other thing is I find maybe slightly too much saturation. Like I'll play with it a bit, just pull down the saturation just a tad. It also has a really yellow glow to it, so maybe cool it just a little bit, add a little bit of red. So that, to me, is slightly more pleasing, but again, these are very minor things. I'll reset it, you'll see the original. So this is what I was doing, that's the original. Either way, a well-executed shot, and you're seeing the whole bird too, the legs and everything. Be cool if the bird was catching a fish, but it's impossible to get that lucky sometimes. So overall, a really good shot. Uh, Architecture cityscape. This one I liked immediately when I saw it. You know, there's certain images when you're going through them quickly that just jump out and you say, wow. And this was one of them. This is the Shard in London. I've seen a lot of photos of it. This is a unique one. I haven't seen this angle. This is a wide angle lens. They're shooting at 12.5 millimeters. And they're really capturing these wonderful leading lines that lead you right to the Shard. The darkened sky makes the Shard pop really nicely. The train tracks, again, great leading lines. So I think it's processed well. It looks to me like those streaking clouds were done in post. I only say that because the shutter speed is over 1/1000th of a second. So you wouldn't get moving clouds like that. May have been done in post. If it was done well. I probably wouldn't have made the sky that black. But again, overall, this was kind of a wow shot. And if I go to London, I'm going to find this location and get this shot. Last point, what might have been pretty cool is to get a long exposure with a train coming through the scene, you know, kind of a blur of a train. But who knows if they had their tripod, who knows about timing. Overall, a really cool wow kind of shot. So here's a shot taken based on the description in Yeehaw Junction. Now, I just happen to know that's in Florida. Long story, but twice a year I drive from Southeast Florida to Tampa. And I go right through Yeehaw Junction. I stay on Route 60. I never get off the road. But now I will, because this is kind of a cool shot. My eye kind of tends to gravitate towards buildings that have seen better days, like this. And this is really good. I like the reflection. You know, I think to make it better, we're losing some detail, it feels like, in the building. Like it's just a little bit too bright. So maybe taking down some of the highlights, which I'll try, and you'll see some of those details kind of emerge. Ideally, I would have shot this head on, not at the angle it's shot at. I strongly suspect that the reflection or the puddle was here, and that's the only place you could have shot it and gotten that reflection. The last thing is, you know, I'm debating a crop. It's like I don't love that telephone pole, electrical pole on the left, and cropping in there, maybe on the right a little bit too. You know, that maybe is a little bit better, but overall a pretty good shot. I think the post-processing is maybe slightly heavy-handed. It's a little crunchy to me. But again, I like the subject. I like the black and white treatment. Overall pretty good. And when I drive on Route 60 now through Central Florida, I'm going to try to stop and find this. All right, let's move to the next one. Actually, the next two are by the same photographer, and I really like them both. So here's some portraits. We haven't done any portraits yet. These are sort of, I'll call them environmental portraits, right? You're putting the subject in a certain environment, which makes sense. And this is really good, right? You have such an amazing character. It's perfectly sharp. The lighting is good. The truck behind it adds something. There's a story here. I mean, the bandana, the beards. If you look closely, there's dirt under the fingernails. This is a guy who's a hard worker, stained pants, worn out shoes. That kind of, the beard, I think everything is great. It's a really good shot. You know, I think for me, if I was playing with it, I might change the crop a bit. I don't love that the truck is not centered. I would just try to probably move this in a little bit, kind of like this, so you have, it's a bit more symmetrical, a little less distracting, but that's totally picky stuff. I mean, this is a really, really good shot in my view. Let me just reset this so I don't mess it up. And the next one I like as well. Again, sort of an environmental portrait. Violin player, I guess it's a violin. In what looks to be an area where there might be a concert. Like, I love the chairs back there. I love the lighting on the violin player. His expression, the composition, the balance, I think is really good. And so in having this violin player in what is sort of an industrial space, I think is super interesting. There's no blown highlights. There's nothing that's purely black either. So kind of, it's a nice balance here. Really, really good shot. Back to architecture. You can tell these are in no particular order, but so I kind of like this image because it has nice geometric features: triangles, squares, contrast, crisscrossing lines. To me, the building is not that interesting. It's somewhat of an abstract shot. I like the reflection in the windows on the left to, I guess, another part of this building. But the building itself is not super interesting. But, given it was there to shoot, it's a good shot. Again, with the sky, I don't love an all black sky. I like to see a little bit of lightness there. So it's a little bit harsh to me, but overall, I like what the photographer was attempting to do. And again, it has some really good geometric features to it. So this one is a really big boat. I think it's like must hold chemicals or something. I could probably look it up. The name of the boat is on there. I see what the photographer was seeing, right? There's a really amazing boat, really cool colors, industrial type area. But what I'm seeing are these distracting branches in the foreground. And it's hard to get over it. And you can, either one, you move, you restructure, you recompose when you're there to not have those in there, if it's possible, or you can get rid of them in post. I mean, this is definitely possible to get rid of these branches. Certainly most of the branches you could get rid of very easily. So I think it's really distracting. By the way, the other thing that's really cool, if you get a shot like this, looking down, where you have a colorful object. Let me go into Photoshop for a second and just do one thing really quickly, which is really just a fun thing to do. If you do, let me just unzoom this, use a tilt shift filter. So go up to filter, blur gallery, I should say, and tilt shift. And what you'll see is the middle will be clear and the outside will be blurry. And what you want to do is rotate it just so that the blur or the clear part is where the subject you want to look at. And you would kind of play with. You can play with these where the focus area is. Move that up. Let me just hit enter. And what you get is sort of this toy effect where the subject looks almost like a toy. I'm not doing a great job of it here, but if you went online and looked up like tilt shift, miniaturize or something, you would see it. It's a really kind of cool feature. But anyway, this one, unfortunately, these branches in front really kind of ruin the shot for me. So here's another portrait. When I first looked at this, I didn't love it. It felt like a bit of an afterthought. But now that I study it, there's something that I like about it. I like the subject. Clearly she's not a 20-year-old fashion model, right? Her face shows experience, if you will, and I kind of like that. Kind of like my face at this point has some experience in it. And so I think this is actually could be a pretty interesting subject. I would rather have the subject looking at me. I think it could really tell a story. I think she's pretty well lit. I like the fact that there's a depth of field going on here. I would get rid of the water bottle on the far right. I don't mind the lighter. I mean, even if there was like a smoking cigarette and an ashtray might be kind of interesting to add to the story. I'm not sure what the photographer was doing. Maybe they were in automatic, but you have an ISO of 6400, which is quite high. You're at f11, and you have a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second, 35 millimeter. You could have really slowed the shutter speed a little bit, cut it in half. lower the f-stop, or open the aperture more, and then you could have really reduced the ISO, which helps from a quality standpoint. So I think you have to be a little thoughtful when it comes to your settings. Again, they may have been in automatic, and this is what the camera decided. I'm not sure. But kind of good subject. I think you got to work with the subject more, have them looking at you, and look for the background. You don't want a half of a water bottle. I don't think it adds to it at all. But again, good shallow depth of field. Not again. As I looked at it more and more, I thought there's a real possibility here. So here's a real industrial. I don't know if this is a chemical plant, some type of energy plant. I think this is a kind of shot that some people will look at it and say, this is actually my kind of shot. I like this kind of image. I think, to me, when I look at this, whoever designed this designed it only for utilitarian purposes, right? There's no real thought into how it's going to look. But it looks kind of cool to me, and I think this photographer shot it at the exact right time of day, when you have some ambient light in the sky, and the lights from this plant are showing up as well, and they're not overwhelming. So I think it's pretty cool. I probably would have had maybe a little bit more detail in the foreground, which is basically just black. So you could take a brush. Looks like I played with it before already, but yeah, brush in essentially some of the area of the foreground, and then just bring up the shadows a little bit just to get some detail. I mean, that's kind of interesting, I think. So I would have done that. But other than that, I think it's a pretty cool shot. And if I knew where this was, I would probably go and shoot this myself. But I could see somebody looking at it and saying, ugh, they don't like it. But again, that's a matter of just taste. Back to architecture. So, I like the building on the left quite a bit. I like the different geometric shapes. I like the overhang. And I like the way they, again, with the sky here, it's not fully black. This is what I was talking about. There's somewhat of a lightness to it. I don't like the building on the right. I think it's kind of boring, and it takes away from the image. If you could just, I'm just going to crop for a second. This is not the way to solve this, but if you cropped in, just to give you a sense of how cool that building is, I'm going to come in here just to, that, I think, that building by itself is more interesting. And the way I would solve for it would be to, in Photoshop, get rid of this building. And it wouldn't be the easiest thing, but you could definitely do it. Now with the remove tool, which is relatively new, you definitely could do it. And then you would have just this center building, which I think is really interesting. And I think the processing on this building is really good. I like the fact that you're seeing kind of the curvature here. It looks like maybe a gradient was added on the side. You have some light on the underhang, so there's some detail there. So this I like. I would just get rid of the other building, but overall a good shot. Here's a street shot, which I've actually done stuff like this. I like things with umbrellas and rain. It really evokes kind of a very cool mood. It looks to me like this may have been selective color, where they just took the person and the umbrella and kept it color and made everything else black and white. It's a little gimmicky to me if they did that. I would make the whole thing black and white or keep it all in color. And I did this many years ago, and I kind of stopped doing it. I just didn't love the look of it. So that's one thing. Secondly, it looks a little over-processed to me. It's a little crunchy. Lastly, the street above is kind of totally black. And I would rather see some detail. I don't know if I can pull it out with a brush. I'm just going to make the brush a little bit bigger. I'm hitting the right bracket key. If I go in here and just pull up the shadows, yeah, it's a small image, which the quality is not great on my computer, but I would want to see some detail there. Having said that, here's the good thing. It's a really cool subject, one, and the composition is really good. When you have someone walking in a scene, to position themselves where they can walk into the scene, I think is really critical. And the photographer did that. So great subject, great composition, processing not wonderful, and I don't love the selective color personally. Somebody else might love it. But overall, something that I would have shot and worked with, tried to make a good shot out of it. So this is a bridge in Florida. I know because I've shot this bridge. In fact, the photographer, as I recall, was inspired by one of my videos where I highlight this bridge. It's a really cool bridge. I believe it's the Pinellas Bridge near St. Petersburg. And I gotta tell you, I think I like this shot better than the one I took. I took mine at night, and so it had a very different feel to it. Kind of the glow of all these supports going back. But there was a lot of dark pieces too, and this I think is better than what I did. I like it a lot. I think it's just really a cool. And by the way, you have to make an effort to go find this. This is not something you'd walk by. Unless you live in this area, there's a little path there, but it's just a really cool shot. One thing you could have done is have an even longer exposure. I don't know what the exposure is, but it looks like it's maybe like a second or two, just to, because it's a dark area. But with a longer exposure, then that water becomes very glassy, and then the eye really gets drawn even more towards the structure itself. But really cool shot, and again, better than the one I took, largely because of the time of day, which was smart to do this in the light. So moving to Washington, D.C., we have seen a gazillion photos of the U.S. Capitol, which is what that building is, for those that don't know. This is clearly unique. There was obviously some exhibit there of this amazing old car. This is not Photoshop, by the way. The car was really there. I'm assuming that woman was really there, too. And I think that the photographer saw this and they saw it well. Like, this is a cool shot. I got to get this. It's exposed well. This is not easy, right? There's a lot of highlights that you have to deal with, but the car is perfectly in focus. The Capitol's in focus. The exposure is good. There's really no blown highlights. This is the kind of image you say, wow, that's cool. This is unique. And it's so hard to create unique images because there's so many photographers, so many great photographers out there. So I'm glad the photographer saw this, took the shot. This is just a really cool shot. And you kind of makes you think about that car, about the person, and the setting. Very, very nice job. Okay, last one, actually. Back to landscape. This is beautiful. Everything is good about this shot, I think. The setting is amazing. It's one thing to find a waterfall, but to find one this beautiful in this setting with the greenery, the post-processing to me is just dead on. It is so good. I don't know if the photographer used the Orton effect or created the Orton effect at all, which you can look that up, O-R-T-O-N, but it allows you to it really does make a nice glow to the highlights. They may have done that. If they did a great job. If this was my image, there are some sticks here and there that you can barely notice, so it's not a big deal that I would have gotten rid of. But, if I knew where this was, I would go there in a second, and I would hope to create this. There is a lightness in the air. I don't know if it was a foggy day. The other thing that's great here is that, there's really no blown highlights, and there's no pure blacks. There's detail in everything. And by the way, this is a good lesson because the shutter speed here is 1.6 seconds. So when you're shooting a waterfall where the water's moving very quickly, you don't have to go out 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. Often you lose detail in the water. This is 1.6 seconds. It is spot on, fantastic. Listen, I hope you enjoy the video and got something out of it. If you do, just hit that thumbs up button, give me a like, and if you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. Obviously doing critiques, you'll be out in the field with me, architecture, landscape, Photoshop tutorials. I love everything about photography. I'm trying to share it with my viewers. And by the way, and again, if you want to have one of your images critiqued, that email is in the description down below. Just shoot me an email with some images and we'll keep this going. Thanks, everybody.